Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so nice to meet you. I'm Phil Taylor, the CTO for Digital Velocity at CDW, and I've got with me Pete Johnson, the head of our AI practice. If you don't know, CDW is in the cloud market. We've been doing business in cloud since 2017. Lots of services work, helping customers with solutions, as well as the traditional stuff that we do, just setting up cloud accounts and helping you consume. I thought today a good topic would be to start with things that we can solve now with AI that are real and tangible for you. And then Pete will give you an overview of the AI market as we see it from CDW's point of view. We have lots of partners and vendors. What I wanted to start with was one of our own internal challenges, kind of give you an idea of how we think about solving problems internally that create efficiency. So one of the biggest things I think generative AI can do for us is increase our business operations and efficiency. We have a pretty big problem when we meet with a customer. It's a very complex opportunity trying to understand what you're trying to achieve. I think the speaker that was just up here before us was talking about a pretty complex cloud transformation, moving 56 applications to the cloud. So traditionally, for that to happen, we would do a number of meetings with you to collect data around scoping, which requires us bringing in a number of talented subject matter experts, which end up costing a lot for us and end up lengthening the time that it takes for our customer to get to the real value and the opportunity they're trying to get to. And so these are some of the things that we're trying to solve for would be the scoping, the pricing. What is that application going to cost to run as we move it into AWS? It's pretty easy to do a lift and shift computation, but when we start transforming you to a cloud native workload, we're changing the pricing model considerably, and it gets fairly complex. So that leads to a lot of coordinated efforts between our teams, which at times can break down, or you don't have access to the David Whartons of the world, who's sitting out here as one of our chief architects for AWS in the audience. And so you might not get the best team or the best result out of us. And so we really wanted to solve for that and reduce delays in time to get back to you, whether it's just general Q&A or producing a proposal, as well as increase the quality of the proposals that we are giving you. And reduce the amount of sprawl. I think if you asked any one of our 4,000 sellers, they tell you it's very difficult to move from selling something like a Dell laptop or a Chromebook to selling a cloud solution and an outcome for a customer. It's very complex and it requires a lot of coordination. So in order to do that, we put a team together to solve this through generative AI, leveraging the subject matter expertise and really moving to where an AI algorithm can ingest that expertise and apply it to the problems that we're talking to you about, which allows us to empower the seller to be more agile and not require a dedicated resource until later in the cycle. For us, that means it shortens the amount of time. And while I'm talking to you about this, I want you to think about adjacent problems you might have in your business. It might be that your HR team is overwhelmed with questions constantly about things that are available in your HR handbook, or process around things like PTO, because the process that I'm going to tell you about applies to many different lines of businesses that you're running and efficiencies in those. Any process that you're thinking about modeling, generative AI can help with that subject matter expertise and reduce the amount of toil that's happening within your teams. So what we ended up aiming for here was a flexible toolkit that could be used both internally with our teams that are developing the IP for us, but as well as for our customers, so that we could accelerate the amount of time that it takes for us to deliver a project for you. So adapting that to a customer-facing solution and then make it customizable to support the needs of our customers, as well as extensibility for future things that we need. And that turned out to be pretty well. The team is moving very fast. And what the architecture is here, you'll see a lot of AWS services, Cognito for authentication, load balancing. At the top, you'll see we're using infrastructure as code and source control. So every time the team checks something in, it automatically deploys into AWS. We're using a set of core infrastructure services, everything from Route 53 for DNS to CloudWatch for understanding what's happening in the application in real time, to Elastic Container Registry as it's a set of containers that deploy, to simple mail service for things that we aren't doing within the application that we need to notify a user or collect more inputs. But at the core of it is this concept of taking something like Anthropic Claude, which is an LLM that's really good at doing analysis and responding, and attaching our own knowledge base. So this is a set of PDFs, in this case, information from AWS about the product set that we have, information from solutions that we've created in the past. And we wrap that in what's called a retrieval augmented generation pattern, which is one of the first Gen AI patterns being used. Pete will probably explain this in a little more depth, but it's the idea that we take our knowledge base, we take the core LLM, and we wrap it with some prompts so that we have some guardrails around what we expect from the user's input and a consistent output. Behind that, we're using things like S3 storage. So if you think about one of the biggest problems to solve here is ingesting all the data that we want to have in our knowledge base and putting it into a vector database. So we're using RDS for a vector store. But that information could be documents from AWS that are coming out around developer documentation of an API or a service that's being released, or it could be data around pricing, as an example. And so those exports are put into an ingest engine, uploaded to S3, and then indexed into a vector store where that RAG model can leverage the LLM to provide an answer. Behind that, we're also connecting Salesforce, which is our CRM, Jira, which is managing our solutions, as well as issue tracking and project statuses, so that as we move from what I would say is fairly static content, we're moving more into adaptive. Is that me? Sorry about that. We're moving more into adaptive responses. My mic is dead. Okay. At the end of the day, it ends up showing up as just a chat agent, so a typical experience that you'd expect. That will be integrated into our Salesforce so that when the seller says they're working with a customer and they think they have an AWS opportunity, the chatbot will show up within their native interface so that they don't have too many tools to go out to. So as mentioning, Amazon Q is running the more dynamic experiences within the solution. And what we've built so far is essentially for qualification. In order for us to meet with a customer, we want to ensure there's budget, need, authority, and timeline. So you understand the problem, you have authority, and you have a budget established. So that's the general Q&A around qualifying an opportunity. And then we move into things like funding. What can AWS help you with, subsidize that first leg of your journey? So that's another feature the team has added that the chatbot is able to accomplish. They're moving into cost and analytics. So think about the ability to take your data center extract of all your assets, maybe your VMware environment, feed it into the chatbot, and then it will produce a cost estimate for AWS in real time. This is something today that takes us probably 40 to 80 hours of human labor that is now accomplishable within a few minutes using the tooling. I think long tail, we look at a vision where this will actually produce a draft of a scope to help outline everything that you're trying to accomplish, as well as a pricing estimate. And for us, what that does is it reduces the amount of time that our super expensive subject matter experts spend doing routine things that the systems can do. I'm going to hand it over to Pete, who's going to talk about generative AI as a market.
Thanks, Phil. So hi, everybody. My name is Pete Johnson. As Phil said, I'm the field CTO of AI here at our digital velocity practice. And Phil just showed you one example of a kind of AI that people can find actionable. AI means lots of things to lots of people, and given the volume of different kinds of customers that CDW works with, and the vast array of different vendors that we work with as well, we wanted to put together a picture that described the entire market in a way that everybody can easily understand. Let's start here. So the general idea, if you look at the axis here on the bottom, is there's some kinds of AI that we think that everybody on the planet is going to implement in one way or the other. And on the far left over there, there's other kinds of AI that we think a select few will. More or less somewhere around the 1 petabyte or above in aggregate data that you would use to train a proprietary model. This is like Fortune 100s. It's niche workloads like financial services and healthcare. As you move left to right across this axis, data complexity and volume increases, and security is important throughout the entire continuum. What you see here on the far left is the kind of AI that we think that everyone will implement, and that is to simply turn on the AI features of applications that you already use to run your business. So if you're somebody that's actively using ServiceNow or something like GitHub because you've got a bunch of developers, if you've got creatives and they're already using the Adobe suite, you might turn on something like Firefly. And then you've got the kind of suite of tools that help general productivity with our friends at Amazon providing Amazon Q. Then you get to the far left, or the far right of the diagram, where if you've got that 1 petabyte of data or more, you might, in order to solve your specific business problems, need to create your own proprietary LLM. So for that, at the bottom of this stack, you typically need some form of GPU farm, which of course you could do with NVIDIA on EC2, and then you could put SageMaker on top of that, because typically you then also have some kind of software stack that helps manage that GPU cluster, that orchestrates the different jobs, that creates some kind of AI workflow. And on top of this stack, you have an army of data scientists who are experts in the art of creating proprietary models. This can be an expensive operation on this far right. The organizations that need this, they really, really need it. But what about everybody else? So what's developed here in the last 18 months or so is this middle column. And it's affordable custom solutions to your specific business problems. There's a number of LLM vendors that are available on a wide variety of clouds, and you can host them on-prem as well. And then using these techniques like that retrieval augmented generation that Phil talked about a moment ago, the combination of a hosted LLM and one of these techniques, there's a large class of problems that you can use to solve that in a way that is more flexible than what you get on the far left, but less expensive than what you get on the far right. So let's deep dive on that just a little bit. So retrieval augmented generation is, as Phil said, one of the first of these patterns where you're reusing an LLM, but tricking it out in such a way with your own custom data that you get it to behave in a certain way. This diagram comes from NVIDIA's blog article on this topic. The original white paper for retrieval augmented generation was written by Meta and some academics in 2020. And that's among the reasons why it's the most popular one today, is because it's been around a little longer. The general idea with RAG is that you've got some data in some location already, and you retrieve it and you take it through an ingestion process with something called an embedding model, which is essentially taking that content and translating it into a binary-like format that's very similar to the format of the internal LLM. You then store that in a special database called a vector database, and that concludes your ingestion phase. At query time, either a user or an application would take a query and pass it through that same embedding model. You do a preliminary query into the vector database, and then you take everything you've assembled at that point and you pass it to the LLM, and you ask the LLM to focus its answer on the information provided and then use its general intelligence to sort of fill in the blanks. So this is what we used in the example that Phil showed a little bit earlier. There's another pattern that we like that's starting to gain popularity called Miracle, which is modular reasoning, knowledge, and language. This white paper came out in 2022 by AI21 Labs, so it's a more recent pattern. So we don't see it quite as widely adopted, but the thing that we like about it is, the problem with RAG is what happens if the data changes at its source? You have to go through the ingestion process again. What if I could come up with a way that I could make the calls to the data live so that the data wouldn't get stale? And that's essentially the problem that Miracle solves, where it takes the LLM and it puts it inside of an agent that has some memory, and then you can describe to that LLM under what circumstances it should make calls to the different live data sources. And you do that using plain English, which makes it very, very easy to use. In either of these, one of the things that we love about AWS Bedrock is choice. There's all kinds of choice with what model you might want to use in using either RAG or Miracle or any of these newer techniques. You're not locked into a particular LLM like you are with some of AWS's competitors. You've got choice here so that you can try different models in different ways, because these have different strengths and weaknesses, and what might be good for one problem might not be good for another. So it gives you the chance to experiment with different model types for different problems. So we went through the real world problem that we solved internally with AI. I just gave you a view of the generative AI market and talked about some of the patterns, what it is we absolutely love about Bedrock and the choice that it gives you. For us, the summary is, there's lots of optimization problems can be solved with these LLMs. You can do this without having to train your own models. And no matter where you are in that life cycle, CDW can help you. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time. The Mission Cloud booth is over at 1954. The CDW booth is at 1388. They're roughly on the right edge of the big AWS booth. And tomorrow we're going to have an avatar live in our booth taking coffee orders. So if you want to see some more of that retrieval augmented generation in action, that's exactly how we did that. You can ask it questions about CDW, you can ask it questions about Mission Cloud, and you can ask it to order the coffee for the barista we'll have live in the booth.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's put a hand together for these guys. Phil and Pete from CDW. Thank you, gentlemen.